G'day, welcome to Bent Brewers Live, proudly brought to you by Bent Spoke Brewing Company. This is our 7th Bent Brewers Live, and we've done all sorts of topics. We've talked about our barrel aging, we've talked about our hops, we've done a session in the brew pub. Tonight, it's all about our birthday. We're turning 6, so here's to us. Just going to mention these beautiful lids again before we head into our birthday stuff, and we're still getting people asking us about why we haven't got the lids on the cans. Well, we've got them on sprocket. So if you buy a sprocket, you'll get the lids. But the story with the lids is that we can't actually get them anymore, and they won't let us use them in New South Wales next year. So we're working on to solve both of those problems, and hopefully we'll have our own new can lid out pretty soon. But let's leave that alone and let's go into our birthday. And I guess... 17 years brewing at the Wigan Pen Brewery and Tavern, and then we didn't really know what was going to happen with the Wigan Pen back in those days, and had an opportunity to get into my own brewery with my partner Tracy and our great family friends, the Meddings family. And I'd just like to welcome Peter Meddings to the show, who's going to talk a little bit about what was going on back there in brewing in 2013. And Pete, welcome to Bent Brewers Live.
Thanks, Rich. Welcome. Very good to be here, mate. Very good.
Trace and I just like to say thanks very much for you and the Meddings for getting involved in Bent Spoke. Obviously, when you're looking to get into business and you select your partners, or you don't select your partners, you have your partners, and you want partners that are going to complement you. And I think Trace and I understood hospitality and understood a little bit about beer, but we had no bloody clue about business. And Meddings family brought the business part to our business, and it's allowed us to get to our 6th birthday. So cheers to everyone out there, Phil, Dale, Karen, and of course Marg and Pete. Pete, what's it feel like to be part of a brewery?
Well, it's pretty interesting, Rich, because as you know, like we are basically an ingredient company, and our first venture outside of that business doing, and still doing, outside of that, this was our first venture, and we couldn't have wished for a better relationship with a brewer that was making extremely good beer. So that was where we come from at that time. So it's pretty interesting, mate. And as long as I get the odd slab, I can be involved with the brewery for years to come.
Yeah, no worries. We'll make sure we get some more beer on the way to down to Melbourne. Some of those easies, especially. I guess Bintani, 25 years. Can you believe it? Tomorrow, magnificent effort there. And that poses the question, I guess, when Bintani started, what was the brewing scene like back then, 25 years ago?
Yeah, well, much different to what it is today. When we started 25 years ago, we actually started, our customer base was very, very small. They were basically all home brewers that had come from home brewing, and they had that push to go into some sort of commercial craft brewing. So they were our customers. They were from the homebrew scene. The ingredients at that particular time were difficult to come by, and what you did come by wasn't that flash. There wasn't a lot of variety. Hops were very poor. Yeast was pretty average at that time. Malt was basically in the same sort of situation. So in those early days, it was a pretty hard time for brewers. One of their things was, I remember, and I really do recall this quite vividly, is that their big thing was that every brew was different. And I can understand that because of the ingredients and what was available to them. But nowadays, it's a different kettle of fish now. We've got brewers that have come from an educated, university-educated background. They've got and the ingredients they've got available to them now, and the variety of various things from all over the world, and they're available here all the time. So it's a pretty different picture that's out there now, and the beer that they're making is excellent. It's consistent. It's just a very, very good beer. And so from 25 years ago till today, there's basically no comparison of particularly on the ingredient side, Rich. So there's a lot that brewers can make nowadays that they could never have got anywhere near 25 years ago.
Yeah, so because I remember back when I started, there were 6 small breweries in Australia, maybe 7, and now we've got over 650. So it's so good for Australia to have such a awesome, beer culture that's obviously ramped right up in the last sort of 5 years. Yeah. There's still lots of people setting up breweries though, Pete, and I always get asked, what are my top tips for somebody setting up a brewery? Your top tips for somebody who's looking to set up their own brewery?
Well, that like I think anyone in the brewing industry, somebody comes to them at some stage and asks, what can you help with? I think there's nowadays you do need a pocket full of money. You need to keep a very good relationship with your bank manager. I think that's important. But most of all, look, it's the passion that goes with making beer, the desire to put in long hours. It's a labour-intensive business, so it's a lot of hard work. But I would imagine at the end of the day, the biggest and best thing you can make is good beer. And I think if you're making good beer, you've always got a really, really good chance of the business succeeding.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. That's I echo those thoughts. I think the quality of the beer is going to lead a long way to the success of your brewery you're setting up.
Absolutely.
I share success and I guess congratulations to us as a partnership on getting to 6 years in the brewing business. Cheers, Pete.
To all of us, mate. Thanks, Rich. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so we'll keep moving on and head into what we're doing for our birthday. And we've had a couple of events. We've had a Spokey live music session on Monday night. We just had our staff session last night, and really interesting way to do a staff session when you've got everyone Zoom in. We ended up talking about our 2-year people who've been with us 2 years. We rewarded all the staff that have been with us for over 2 years, and that's amounts to over 20 people, which is quite a number of people that have been with us for over 2 years. We also talked about people who have been with us for over 5 years, and we've got 2 people who have been connected with BentSpoke for over 5 years, one just over 6 years and one approaching 6 years. And big shout out to Steve Dolby, our cleaner, who's been with us since before the brew pub opened, and second to that, Rod Jackson, who's worked as a chef in our kitchen since September 14. So put in the hard yards. We sell a fair bit of food in the brew pub, some 3,000 meals a week, and Rod's had a hand in most of those meals that have gone out. So I think that's pretty amazing, and we'll be taking those guys on a little great little beer experience that we've got lined up for when we can travel, and we'll find that out soon, and we'll get that underway. Tonight, obviously, we've got Bent Brewers Live. Tomorrow, we've got Cheesy Beers, so we've got a session with the Cheesesmith, five cheeses matched to 5 interesting beers, which we're going to do live for you here. You can still get the cheesy packs, so if you haven't got one, get one of those and saddle up tomorrow night for a few good beers, a few good cheeses, and no doubt a few good stories. But thought I might just take you all back to when we were building a brew pub and show you a little bit of footage of what it was like to build a brew pub. So let's just have a quick look at that. All right, so we've got a little glitch in our little thing we do here. So we'll keep moving along, and we'll come back to that bit because I really would love you all to see it. So I think what I'll do is I'll go to the first beer that we've released this week in the brew pub, and I've got a little bit here in the Traveller because I'm sitting in our barrel room at the cannery, so I'm not sitting in the brew pub. So the first beer we've got tonight is a little beer that we call Silverback. It's a beer it's an English old ale in style, so it's really malty. We've made it a bit more sessionable at 6.4% this year, but what we do is we run this through our hoppinator and we infuse it with some flavours. So we've got 5 different spices. We've got juniper berries, cloves, cinnamon, star anise and nutmeg. We've got mandarins, and it's just started the awesome truffle season here in Canberra. So we've put in some truffles as well. And I really love working with truffles, both not only in food, but they actually work really well in beer, because what happens with the truffle is it uses the compound glutamate, which is in the truffle, and glutamate basically helps to combine the flavours of the spices and the fruit that you have over here and the flavours of the beer that you have over here. And if you ever get the chance, which you probably won't because we only serve it with truffles, to try the beer with and without truffles, it's amazing at how different the beer is with the truffles in it. So truffle doesn't need to give you aromas of earth and mushroom and fungi. It actually plays a role through chemical intervention in making that beer a much better beer to drink. So that's our first beer we've got on tap, and be lucky to be listening and you're in Canberra. Get on into the brew pub and try one of those. It'll only be around for season, doesn't actually go that long, it's sort of a couple of months. And so yeah, it's something really interesting. We've obviously getting some nice local truffles, and we infuse that beer every week with fresh truffles. I think we've got the video ready to go now, so we might jump to that. Welcome to Ben Spoke Brewing Company. We're hopefully trying to land a brew pub with some different, interesting, handcrafted beers and ciders on Canberra's doorstep, with some interesting food to match. Alright, here we are at the main bar. So we have main bar along here. This is where all the beer taps will be. This section up here, you'll be able to sit up at the bar and watch Tracy work in behind in the brewery. And down this end we've got a little retail bar where we'll be selling our takeaway flasks.
When you're in the jungle, there are things you need to bring along. You need a hat cause it is sunny, and penicillin never goes wrong. There are monkeys there at play, but I like to play my way, play Nintendo in the jungle.
Then we've got our fabulous bent stairs, which sum up Bent Spoke really.
So you can imagine coming up the stairs and straight to another bar, all the 18 beers on tap, door in behind, kitchen around the back.
Right, we're just getting all the cool room nice and level, so all our walls are plumbed. We've got a nice seal, so there's no cold air getting out at all. We've come in my way as well at the top.
There's some things that you must have. You need some.
These are the 3D isometrics for the kitchen area. You've got this massive range hood across the top here.
And then this is all our dining area. So hopefully we'll do some brews at later times of the day, so people sitting there having dinner can see the beer being made.
There are monkeys there at play, but I like to play
Painting the floor.
This sort of job we're normally here for 3 days. I think we've been here for 3 months. Finished product. Oh, here comes the boss. Cut video.
You're going to need a jungle lady friend.
We're also making 2 feature lights that go over the stairs out of black parts, which have been kindly given to us by local black shops down the road.
We've travelled the world a fair bit looking at brew pubs and taken down all the good things that we found in a lot of different brew pubs around the world and tried to put it all together and with our sort of twist on it. So that is Ben Spoke, and Case and I'd like to say that we hope everyone can at least put their head in at some point and see something that's a little bit different.
Yeah, I know, I walk in here and I see the tanks and I'm like, so what a beer.
So there you go. That was a little video of how we started our Ben Spoke, and I guess the first beer we ever made was it's hard working on a building site when you're trying to install a brewery and keep everything clean. Every time we clean all the tanks, they'd all get full of dust again. So we finally knew that we'd kick everyone out on Easter Friday. So Good Friday we came in, Trace and I, and we thought we'd brew our first beer, and aptly named Dick Tracy. You only get to name one beer after yourselves. So we brewed this Belgian brown, American brown ale, and we hit our numbers, and we got it in the fermenter, and sure enough, in a few months' time when we opened, sure it was a couple of months old, but it was dry hopped a few times, tasted pretty damn good, if you ask me, and that came on tap, and that's actually on tap at the brew pub at the moment. We always brew that every Good Friday. Every Good Friday we brew that beer. We release a couple of batches each year, and it's our little nod to how it all started there back in Ben Spoke. The other beers we had on tap actually when we started were we had the Mort's Gold, which is our lager. We had the Barley Griffin, which back then had was sort of dry spice with oregano. We sort of pulled that out of it a bit later on when we realised that people actually just wanted a nice, good drinking pale ale and nothing too bent about it. So that was the call there. Obviously, we had Brad and Bitter on the hand pump. We had our hand crushed cider. We've been making cider for a fair bit of time and always crush our own apples. We still do that today. We actually bought a heap of apples off the farmers in Batlow who had all their crops or all their trees sort of ravaged by the fires, and they had a lot of apples in store. So we were happy to go in and buy all those apples and give them a bit of cash to be able to, go and stay in a hotel after their house got burnt to the ground. So, but we also had Crankshaft on tap, and Crankshaft has become our biggest selling beer, both in the brewery in Braddon in the brew pub, but also in cans. And we went through a little over 3,000 litres that weekend when we first opened, June long weekend, and we had a few heavy weeks the next few weeks afterwards to try and catch up. I think we were down to one beer on tap there at some point, so pretty interesting sort of time. We managed to get the taps all filled by the end of the year, so we had 18 different beers pouring, 16 tap beers and 2 on hand pump. So I think that wasn't a too bad an effort when you're trying to keep up with brewing the beers you start with, but introducing new beers. And I guess the memorable beers that happened in the first year were really all about, I think Training Wheels was a beer we did with our staff when we first opened. That was great to have all the staff in the brewery, something that we need to do probably a bit more often. We've had a lot of our staff come through the brewery, but we could probably do a little bit more there, get Training Wheels out of the dust and bring that back. I think moving on, we also started to do quite a few events. We had a beer that we did called to celebrate being partnered with the Curry Fest, which was in Canberra in winter, and we did a beer called Delhi Beer Belly, which was flavoured with all those beautiful Indian spices. Wasn't a beer you're going to have 14 pints of, but it was certainly a beer you could have 1 or 2, and it was also good to show the different flavours that you can actually get into beer. I think we might have our first question. Someone's fired in one, so let's go to that. Dave, what have they got for us?
From Doug Hovey, any idea if you'll bring back the PSI Imperial Saison?
So from Doug Hovey, will you bring back the PSI, which was an Imperial Saison we did? That's a good one, actually. I actually don't mind that. I love the style Saison. We do a Saison as well as an Imperial, and I thought the Imperial wasn't a bad beer as well. So, yep, we need a new challenge in the brew pub, so we'll bring that back over maybe the coming months. So stay tuned for that. So going through into our second year, and I think the second year we signed up to this place where we are now, the cannery, which is allowed to do cans. And when we first started out here at the cannery, we thought we'd turn this into we'd have a little packaging line there, and we had a few little 3,000 litre fermenters, and we thought, yeah, we'll just brew the beer in Braddon, put it on a tank on the back of a truck, bring it out to Mitchell, can it, and off we go. And we thought, oh yeah, 400 cartons of beer, that'll be heaps. We'll never sell that much. And that sort of was probably our only mistake we ever made today. So we've had to fast track a bigger brewery. We put in a few bigger tanks now. It's pretty full out here actually. And so that's sort of how all the cans sort of started in our second year. Going into our third year, I guess we just consolidated where we were. I think we had 2 years of starting up, 2 years of sort of growth phase, and then 2 years of sort of really business building, and that's how we've got to the 6 years. So third year we had our first staff retreat. So that was something pretty special to take away our staff. We'd just gone over the 30 mark there because we hadn't really had many people out in the cannery. So that was pretty interesting as well. We released a beer called Gooseneck, which was our smoked IPA, which was real sort of interesting character. We're using that one to try and get those earthy characters through to match the smoke characters you get from using smoked malt. Just might pause and have a quick sip. We did start a tradition though, and at one point it was going to get out of control, and that was every birthday. Our first birthday was in 2015, so we released an Imperial Stout at 15%. Our second birthday was 2016, so we moved it up to 16%. Our third was 17, we went to 17%. Then we just had a bit of a think and thought, we're not going to keep being able to do this really, so we started something we can't finish. But because we'd started in cans, we thought, why not share our birthday beer with everybody else? We sort of couldn't, we would have had to take a bank loan out to pay the excise if we did an 18% beer. So we nailed it back to 10%. But what we did was we actually started to age the beer in bourbon barrels. The first year we did that, we got some really great vanilla characters and some bourbon characters from that beer. The best thing about having barrels is that the flavours in the barrels evolve over time. And this little number that's coming out now, it's available all around Australia. It's available online. It's aged in those same bourbon barrels, aged for 12 months in those bourbon barrels. The flavours have changed, and the impact of the barrel has changed. It's certainly lessened in terms of the vanilla and the bourbon. But what it's done is it's picked up some of the wild yeast characters that are floating around in the air and get into barrels because they're porous. So we've now got a little bit of Brett character coming through, and it really does complement the bourbon and the vanilla character. We also aged some of this beer in red wine barrels because we wanted a little bit more tannin to cut through that really rich malt character that you get in an Imperial Stout. So you'll be able to find this in the brew pub from Saturday. It'll be in all good bottle shops from next week. You can order it from our online store. We've even got a nice little fancy glass to go with it too, so you can get a birthday pack. So cheers. Here's to number 6. We've got a question there.
Justin Taylor, how much does COVID shape the events calendar for your birthday, or is it always going to be a big batch?
Yeah, well, look, it's a good question because how did COVID shape our birthday plans, or was it going to be a big bash from Justin Taylor. Look, we always do something for our birthday. I mean, it's, it is a milestone. Each year the business has changed, the business has grown. We've got better at stuff all the time. I think that's one of the pleasing things. And we're always going to do a range of events. Most of them are going to be online. But as we've been allowed to get more people back in the pub, we've got a bit of cake. We're going to cut a bit of cake on Saturday. It's great to have a few people around. I think we've got 50 people who are allowed in our pub in 3 different areas coming in. So that's really good. It's really good to get people back in the pub. I mean, pubs are about beer, but they're also about conversation, and I really miss that banter. Going into the pub on a Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and having that chat with some of the regulars and just really talking about not beer stuff, or sometimes, they'll whinge and complain about a beer not being on tap, or they'll actually give us a compliment every now and then on a beer that they're drinking, and that's what pubs are all about. It's sort of like a lounge room away from your lounge room, and I think at the moment a lot of people are missing that. So we've had a lot of people coming into our pub over the last few weeks as we've been able to open up to patrons, and it's really great to see. And people are so happy to be back out. But I think we'll just also acknowledge, all the hospitality staff that are out there, because they haven't been able to do their thing for a long time. They're coming back. There's new rules. There's new regulations. There's new things we have to abide by. There's new sequences of service. And it's important to understand that whilst you're coming into our pub and you're happy to be back and having a beer, these guys have had to change their whole life and their whole job. So I hope everyone appreciates the massive change that hospitality people have gone through to be able to serve you a beer at the moment. It's not a normal scenario for anyone, having to go from serving beers or pints over the bar, having a Q20 deep at the bar, to being able to do table service in a pub. So, yeah, just show a little bit of, a little bit of patience, because, everyone's trying their hardest to get you your beer. Then we've got another question.
Jose Lorenzo, there are a number of breweries out there on a weekly basis. Have you thought about doing this going down this path? Do you think it's sustainable? It seems to be working for the ones who are doing it. Cheers and happy birthday. Yeah,
look, that's a good point. I think people are churning out beers every day. We every week, pretty regularly, to be fair. We put out, we've got a few different series that we do in cans. So we've got our core range, which we feel is a good balanced range. It's certainly on the hoppier side, but that's what we like to brew, and we're always going to brew beers that we like to drink as well. We've got the Bending Spoke series, where we do things a little bit differently with those, and we've had quite a few sort of beers that have come out. We've had a sour come out. We've had our Imperial Stout come out. We've also got a Drifter series, which they're a bit more sessionable beers. We've had a Goza come out. We've had a Black IPA. We do our Cluster 8, which is our double IPA, come out on a regular basis through the year. We've also got our Free Whirling series, and where we've done some collaborations, notably recently with Sapphire. So we release a fair few cans. I mean, one of the things when you're running a business is you've got to make sure that you have some sort of consistency to be able to plan against. And I think you fight so hard. Our sales team fights so hard to get that one little spot in the shelf in a fridge. And the last thing you want to do is have that beer run out and then have to try and run another beer in there pretty quickly to keep that spot. So that's why core range, or beers that are around all the time, really do work. And I think breweries that want to go through growth have got to balance that core range versus balancing new beers coming out. We'll always be open to new beers. The brew pub, we certainly have great opportunity to do new beers all the time, and we're trying out different flavours, different beer styles, our take on different beer styles all the time. I think in the brew pub we've got about 25, 26 different beers on at the moment, and that's just because we're keen to play around and see what's next. Some of the other milestones I think that we've had in our 6 years is certainly our staff. It's it's amazing to see earlier so many staff that have been with us 2 years. I think at our first retreat we had 46 staff. At our second retreat we had 78 staff, and recently we had 96 staff. Obviously, COVID has caused that staff number to dip a little bit, but we're all coming out of that now, and hopefully we can get our full team back and back together again and working together to take us all forward. You brew beer for people to drink, and I think growth is really good. Growth shows that people want to buy your beer. We've had our beer now available pretty well all around Australia with the can lids that we've had to change. We're now able to look at moving into South Australia, which is something that we'll start to do when we get a few minutes. But I think the growth and certainly getting up towards 2 million litres has been a really do over the 6 years. Some of the other beers that we've done really well, I think, a couple with the stories, is a beer called Larkins Brown, which is Larkins was a guy who set up one of Australia's first breweries in Sydney, and he's notably made a brown ale in Sydney, and we managed to get hold of that recipe through a good friend of ours, beer historian David Hughes, and he allowed us to brew that, or not allowed us, but he gave us that recipe to brew, and we had a go at that and put a nice interpretation on that. They're the things that make brewing really fun. We brewed a beer with called the Colonel with purple corn. The purple corn is an interesting ingredient because it's a lot more nuttier than just normal corn. Maize is used in a lot of beers, most notably Corona. We weren't trying to make a purple Corona. We actually wanted to make a beer with a lot of flavour in it. So we used a fair bit of purple corn. It was an interesting beer. Probably not one I'd rush to do again. I'd probably choose that PSI first, but certainly glad we played around with a new ingredient that came out on the market. I think we've got another question.
Our first YouTube question from Demir. Hey Rich, will you brew more lager styles like Munich beers and my favourite Bohemian beers, Pilsners? Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Demir. I think I know Demir. He's a really good lager brewer, and he started joining the Canberra Brewers. Big shout out to the Canberra Brewers. They've set many amateur brewers on their way to professional brewers, and Canberra is lucky to have a really awesome Canberra Brewers club, and all making really good beers. We support the Canberra Brewers in some little way. We always try and brew the best beer in their annual comp. Big shout out to Stephen Lawford there for his win in the Bent Brewer this year. We brewed his American Pale Ale, American Strong Pale, and it went down a treat in the pub. Probably will bring that recipe back, I think, at some point. But back to your question, Demir. You've always been fascinated with lagers. You've always brewed good lagers. I remember a couple that didn't turn out that well, but most of them have always turned out pretty good. I think you're right. I think we should probably brew some more lagers. We've got a bit of time, so we'll look at trying to carve out a role and fit in a few lagers in our schedule. I'd also like to say I'd love to do an Oktoberfest too. So maybe we need to start brewing those beers now, and let's get an Oktoberfest together and get a nice cracking pint of or stein of a nice German Marzen or Oktoberfest beer, maybe even a Dunkelbock or a Doppelbock, and maybe also for you one of your Bohemian lagers. Cheers. So yeah, another couple of milestones. I mean, as I was saying a bit earlier, you brew beers for people to enjoy, but as brewers, we like to enter our beers into competitions. We like to get recognition, and we've won a fair few awards, certainly around the Australian competitions, but we've entered our awards overseas, and we've won a couple. They're fairly memorable for me personally because we entered our beers in the International Beer Awards in London, and we entered those Barley Griffin and Crankshaft in 2017. Barley Griffin won best beer in its category, and Crankshaft won a silver medal for second best beer. We re-entered those beers in this biannual competition, and not only did we defend our gold medal for Barley Griffin and category winner, we also picked up a gold for Crankshaft as well. So I think that was the first time that someone had actually gone back to back with category wins in that competition. So for me, that was a pretty special special scenario because you're sending your beer all over the other side of the world to be judged by some of the best beer people in the game, and I think that's a nice little pat on the back for that. The other big award I think we won, which was a little bit of a surprise, was winning a bronze medal at the World Beer Cup for our Red Nut. And a little story behind that is that I wasn't really that happy with the Red Nut that we brewed out at the cannery. That particular batch wasn't as good as it could be. I still drank it; it was still great, but it wasn't as good. It wasn't going to win a medal. And I went into the brew pub and grabbed a couple of kegs of some of the Red Nut that Tracer's made in at the brew pub and brought it out here and canned it off, and we entered that into the competition, and it won a bronze medal. So for me, that was a good little thing. You've always got to enter the best beer you can, and if that means going above and beyond, well, that means going above and beyond. I think we've got time for another question.
John Griffiths, if you could only make one beer for a desert island keg, one malt, and what would you choose?
John, thanks for coming on. A big shout out to the Rat Patrol, actually, which John's part of, and who helped us weld those lights together that we have hanging in the brew pub. And we had some pretty crazy sessions late at night. I must admit, I did nothing. I was not part of the welding team at all. Traced it a little bit, but the Rat Patrol certainly helped us there. But John, to your question, one hop, one malt in a keg on a desert island. You got me. I actually got to think about this for a little bit. I suppose I've got to think about the context of where I am. So I'm on a desert island. I'm probably not going to have a lot to eat, a lot to choose from potentially. So I'm probably going to go with something that fits in. And actually, it's funny because when I talk about doing beer and food matching, or I always talk about the 3 C's. So I want to compare, contrast, and I want a cleansing factor. So I want flavours that are going to follow that same 3 C's. So at desert island, I would select Sabro. It has a real coconutty character, and for me, that's that's comparing flavours there. I'd probably select something like a crystal malt, which is going to give me a little bit of toffee. So I can think about coconut and toffee. The toffee will certainly contrast to sitting on a desert island, which is going to be quite dry, I reckon. So we're going to have sweet toffee, desert island dry. We've got coconut character from the Sabro. I think if I made a lager, it would end up nice and dry and it'd do that cleanse. So there you go, John. I'm going to go Sabro and crystal malt. I'm going to make some sort of coconutty toffee lager, and I'm going to enjoy that keg on the desert island. Okay, so I guess moving on now, we just got a few little things to wrap up. A big shout out again to our business partners for coming on the show, but also for supporting us, getting to 6 years. We've got a wonderful team. We've got 20 odd people who have been with us over 2 years, a couple of people that have been with us over 5 years. What we change? Probably not a lot, to be honest. We still love what we do. We still think we make some pretty good beers out there. Some people are buying them, so we're growing, which is great. We like making these beers, so get in and try a Descent. Get in and try a Silverback in the pub. I've given you the story about the can lid, so buy a Sprocket if you really want the can lid. So thanks very much for coming in and 6 years with us. I think I've got 6 different beers here, so I'm going to enjoy all these. Next week on the show, we're going to head off to barrel season part 3, and we're going to bring on the show someone who I think is probably leading Australia in sour beer production. So we're going to welcome Topher on the show from Wildflower. So please tune in next week. Bent Brewers Live, Part 8. Barrel Season Part 3. Happy birthday, Ben Spoke. Cheers.